Hello, everybody. I'm Samantha Harms with your Garrison Public Affairs office. Welcome back to another episode where this week we are talking the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Remagen and the role that the 3rd Armored Corps played in that. We're going to be doing this on location at the National Mounted Warrior Museum. So let's get right on into it on this week's episode of The Great Big Podcast.
Welcome everybody to the Great Big Podcast. I'm Specialist Bowden Drake Dees from the 3rd Armored Corps Public Affairs Office. Today, we're talking about the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Remagen right here at the National Mounted Warrior Museum on Fort Cavazos, Texas. Let's get into it. Welcome back. We're here at the National Mounted Warrior Museum, Fort Cavazos, Texas, and I'm sitting here with a 3rd Armored Corps representative. Sir, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, good morning. My name is Colonel Stephen Tabbitt. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff of the 3rd Armored Corps here at Fort Cavazos.
And sir, we're talking about the 80th anniversary of the crossing of the Ludendorff Bridge, the Battle of Remagen. And we're sitting here and we're actually with a very important piece of that history.
That's right. This is a stone taken from the construction of the bridge, left over, after the bridge fell and the end of World War II and whatnot. The mayor of Remagen actually presented this to the 3rd Armored Corps as a token to say thank you. It's pretty significant as we enter, into the 80th anniversary, and you go back and this stone was laid sometime around 1916 is when the bridge was built. So we've got a little more than 100 years of history just right next to us here. So it's pretty cool.
It's very, very impressive. And so there was a lot of events that had to happen before we got to Remagen. So I'm hoping you could walk us through a bit of what led the U.S. into World War II.
Sure. So obviously we were involved with operations in Europe. But we were sort of at an arm's distance. We didn't really want to take a position during the initial portion of the war, going back to 39, and then Pearl Harbor occurs. We become embroiled, and then we start to see the introduction of U.S. forces. We saw a lot more equipment being sent over. We saw the introduction of U.S. forces in 42, late 41, early on into 42, and then we continue from North Africa, on through the, up from the Mediterranean and then around into France. Obviously, the most famous is probably Normandy in June of 44. In September of 44, after the breakout of Normandy in September of 44, the Allies decided that they wanted to find a way into northern Germany. So they consolidated some gains, they got some big ports, they finally were able to get Antwerp, and they decided they were going to make a push into northern Germany. We looked to create a salient of about 65 miles into northern Germany, and that was where we see Operation Market Garden. So Market Garden occurs. Interestingly enough, as we're talking about bridges, Market Garden was really centered around the seizure of about 9 or 10 different bridges over all the various canals and rivers in the Netherlands and then on into Germany. Obviously, the Market Garden was not successful because of the failure to capture the Arnhem Bridge, which, interestingly enough, is over a portion of the Nieder Rhine, or the lower Rhine River, as it flows out into Netherlands. Sort of stalled, right? And then the Germans decided that they were going to mount a offensive campaign, and that's where December of 44, that's when the Germans decided they were going to attack into the Ardennes forest, which we refer to that as the Battle of the Bulge. And the Germans, of course, refer to it as the Ardennes Offensive. After the Ardennes Offensive begins, that's where we see the introduction of the 3rd Armored Corps into active, combat. As a headquarters, the Corps itself landed in France in deployed to France, and they got there about September of 44, and spent a couple of months in France preparing, marrying up units with their equipment, conducting maintenance, conducting command post exercises, map reconnaissance, those kind of things, and essentially waiting for the call. Our Corps Artillery Unit was pulled away and sent off to go support General Patton in 3rd Army. And in December of 44, the 3rd Armored Corps was committed to an area around Metz, France, where they received the surrender of a German fortification there at Fort Jeanne d'Arc. And then the 16th of December occurred, which was the day that the German offensive began. And by the 19th of December, the 3rd Armored Corps was told to pack up and begin moving. And so 19 December, they began movement. They arrived in Luxembourg City on the night of the 19th, the morning of the 20th. By the night of the 20th, the morning of the 21st, they'd begun moving into Belgium, and where they would take up positions in support of operations for really in support of First Army and General Hodges, but it was mostly to relieve pressure on Third Army there in the Battle of the Bulge. So once the Bulge culminates, the Third Armored Corps was essentially sent. It was the first time they went into Germany, and the headquarters themselves were posted in Germany, slightly inside of Germany. It's just east of the town of Aachen, Germany. And then the Allies came up with a plan to penetrate deeper into Germany, and that's where we see the Third Armored Corps begin its movement to the north slightly and east into the Ruhr Valley, which is a major industrial area for the Germans. And that was when really everything began to move off into the east to finally attack into Germany. And that's where we see the Rhine River really coming into play as a significant obstacle that we had to get through.
And the Rhine River has been known for centuries to be a heavy obstacle. It's one of Germany's great defenses. Julius Caesar famously was the first Roman to cross it. I've read there's hundreds of legends about people who have crossed and how difficult it is. So the Third Armored Corps and the Allied invasion in general is well aware of the difficult task that is ahead of them.
As much as a piece of geography can become steeped in everything from mythology to music to artwork and literature, the Rhine River is very much a significant portion of not only German but European history and culture. There are myths surrounding Lorelei. She was a German maiden who threw herself in the river because of heartbreak, and then it was known that she would lure men into the Rhine to meet their demise, sort of thing. But it was a fast-flowing river. It was a little bit deeper, and so it was a tough river for us to consider crossing. In terms of other symbolisms that the Rhine brought with it, it was the river that both divided Europe, kept the Romans out of the Germanic areas and those, the tribes for years. It also is a river that unified Europe because it was a major transportation hub. It was a major highway to move goods and people, north and south all across, Europe. And so it was a major symbol for the Germans, right? It was also the Germans' sort of last line of defense. They chose to defend it a little bit to the west as a way to create some depth, but the plan was that as they were overwhelmed, or if they couldn't hold the territory in the areas to the west of the Rhine, that they would retreat back across the Rhine, and then it would begin removing all those bridges. so that the Allies had to, really fight their way into Germany and cross this major, water crossing. And for whatever reason, most of the bridges to the north were all destroyed, and it was not the case when the 3rd Armored Corps elements began arriving into the Remagen area in March of 45.
And there were some odd 40 bridges that crossed the Rhine at that point, and the Germans were blowing them up, sometimes right in the face of the Allied invasion on their way in. And so the 9th Armored Division rolls up to Remagen that morning and sees the Ludendorff Bridge still intact.
Right. So the Allies began a plan where they attacked essentially from north to south, from about Nijmegen in the north, all the way south to about Strasbourg, France. And they began a west to east movement with 3 army groups, just online. And imagine, if you will, an army group has 2 to 3 numbered armies, and then each numbered army has 2 to 3 corps. Each division or each corps has 2 to 3, 4 divisions. So you're talking about a significant chunk of men and materiel moving on a line, north-south line, moving to the west. And so on the morning of the 7th of March, 1945, the 9th Armored Division, led by Major General John Leonard. He actually had some discussions with the 3rd Armored Corps commander, General Milliken, about, hey, what would happen if we show up and that bridge is intact. They did some things to where they prevented folks from just dropping random bombs on bridges, which was a fairly common thing in those days. If an U.S. or an Allied Air Force or air crew was flying back and they still had bombs in the rack, it was targets of opportunity, and they would drop bombs on targets of opportunity, and they placed a sort of a no fire area on top of that bridge. Please don't destroy this, and so there was some thought that it might still be up and it might still be standing, but they really didn't know until scouts showed up on the bank of the Rhine River just north of the town of Remagen, and they saw the bridge. And at that point, they called Brigadier General Hogue, who was an engineer who was in charge of Combat Command B. So he sort of separated the division into 2 different combat commands. And interestingly enough, we had a engineer who was in charge of Combat Command B. And his operations officer said, the bridge is still standing. And he actually went to the banks of the Rhine River and looked south down the river and was shocked, just very surprised that they hadn't destroyed the bridge yet. And so rather than actually following the orders that he was given, which was to attack in a direction around to the south of the town and begin to prepare for the assault, he actually just sent soldiers right into the town. Just sent them right in. We have to act now to take this bridge. He had mentioned that it was probably the move of a lifetime, is what he referred to it as, words in that effect. And so the soldiers from under his command began to move into the town of Remagen, and they were so fast and they were moving so quickly that the Germans were caught off guard. Interestingly enough, that was the case across the entire frontage of the offensive. They were moving really about 3 weeks faster than planners had thought they were going to be able to move. So the logistics caught up. They were able to really consolidate gains quickly, and the resistance that the Germans had planned on in a lot of these towns had sort of melted away. And so, again, moving faster, they get to the bridge, and the Germans were just caught flat-footed, along with some other missteps that didn't help the Germans out as well.
And so they push through Remagen. They've gone street to street. They have the town. And now Able Company, led by Lieutenant Kyle Timmerman, is approaching the bridge. And so how do they get across?
So the Germans had some procedures in place to to actually destroy the bridges. Lieutenant Timmerman and his unit are approaching. The Germans had actually begun to retreat everybody from the west, on the west bank of the river, across to the east. There was actually a anti-aircraft unit that was forward of the bridge, and that commander called the major, the German major who was responsible for the bridge, and said, hey, you can't close the bridge yet. I've got this new secret weapon. I've got to get it across the bridge. And so that led to a slowdown in the German plan to destroy the bridge. Then the other part too, which maybe a lot of people don't know this, is the explosives that were placed on the bridge, several charges on either side of the bridge, was actually the wrong explosives. They ordered a certain type of explosive that would cut through the stone and the steel that was there, and they got a different type of explosive that was not as strong and couldn't penetrate through the material. The other thing too is when they wired it, it's believed that they wired some of the detonators most of the detonators backwards. And so all these things are starting to build up, right? And not to mention the German High Command had placed a restriction on the bridge commanders and said that in order to destroy bridges, they had to have express written permission from their higher headquarters. So the command is given to the major who's in charge, hey, go ahead and drop the bridge, and it comes in the form of a written note. So then the commander writes a note and says, hey, go ahead and destroy the bridge. He gives it to the captain that's down in charge of security. So then the captain says, okay, we have to destroy the bridge. So he goes and tells the lieutenant, who's actually physically responsible for the actual ground of the bridge, and the lieutenant says, well, where's my written order? And so they're sort of going back and forth, and in the meantime, the Americans are just continuing to move forward. And so finally, the lieutenant says, I've got to act, and so he decides he's going to detonate it. 2 of the charges go off right in front of the Americans. They actually watched the charges go off, and then nothing else occurred. So that's when Lieutenant Timmerman says, hey, we got to get across the bridge. So he immediately begins to move forces across the bridge and secure it. And engineers are right behind him, and they begin removing about 1,000 pounds worth of explosives that had been mounted along the bridge, wired backwards, perhaps. But they spent the rest of their time removing those explosives and just moving as many forces across as they could, all while under sniper fire. They were able to get a dismounted infantry battalion across pretty quickly to begin expanding, sort of that security perimeter on the eastern shore. And then eventually they were able to move an armored infantry battalion, a mechanized infantry battalion, if you will, across the bridge. And so now the bridge is being shot at by the Germans with small arms fire. They're actually throwing artillery on it. The Germans used V-2 rockets. It was the first time that V-2 rockets were pointed at targets inside of Germany proper. Several V-2 rockets. In fact, the accuracy is questionable because the closest one landed about 300 meters away. It did injure some civilians and some American soldiers that were there, but the Germans, they knew, the German High Command knew that this was our last ditch. We've got to stop them. We've got to remove this bridge, and they were unsuccessful. And in the course of the next 10 days, the Americans were able to put some pontoon bridges down along the side because they didn't know the state of the Ludendorff Bridge. For 10 days, they actually had dedicated a battalion of engineers and some port construction folks and to shore up the Ludendorff and try to keep it standing. But for 10 days, under constant artillery barrage and rockets and small arms fire and sniper fire, they kept the bridge standing. And then on the 17th of March, after 5 divisions made it across, the bridge just collapsed on itself and fell into the water of the Rhine, killing, incidentally, about 28 American soldiers who were on the bridge at the time. They were tending to the bridge, conducting the maintenance there. So that's how the bridge comes to be. But it was probably the most significant blunder on the German side of the war, at least at that time. And it was probably the most fortuitous surprise that the Americans could have received in at least in 1945 up until that point, was the seizure of that bridge intact.
I mean, some of the estimates that you look at or that I've read say that seizing the Ludendorff Bridge shortened the war by upwards of 2.5 months and saved in excess of 2,000 lives.
Yeah, that's and I think 2,000 is probably a very low number. I
Really?
think it's probably 5 or 6 times that, because as you think about the opportunity to defend, from the high ground, if you will, basically shooting down into a river valley, the Germans would have been at an extremely advantageous position. So using terrain to their advantage. I think 2,000 is a way low number. But they did everything they could to try and remove that bridge. From floating mines down the river to frogmen with torpedoes. They did everything they could. And then the Americans, of course, they did some things that were sort of new. They established large searchlights and large lights that were in an attempt to offset German targeting. The searchlights were away from the bridge, but still close enough to where the engineers could use the light while they were working on the bridges at night, as well as the pontoon bridges down below. But it was those spotlights that helped illuminate swimmers that were in the river as they were bringing these torpedoes up to try and blow up the supports and the superstructure for the bridge.
So we kind of come to today now, and as we said, this is 80 years on from this battle that was very pivotal in shortening the war and saving so many American lives. Why is this still relevant to us today?
It's a great question. It's relevant because, one, it's our history, right? And so we owe it to our organization. We owe it to our legacy, if you will, to understand the things that our folks that have gone before us were able to accomplish. The other thing that I think is relevant is conducting what's known as a wet gap crossing or an assault across a river is extremely difficult. Probably the most difficult major military operation that we can ask folks to be a part of. The other thing I think that's relevant about this particular operation is that it really places a premium on planning. It really places a premium on the ability to conduct mission command. Had General Engineer Combat Command B, Brigadier General Hogue, had he not had the trust of his superiors, had he not had the shared vision, had he not had the understanding of the plan, he may not have been able to make a change to his orders and assault the bridge when he did and capitalize on the fact that the Germans were caught flat-footed there. And so there's some mission command lessons there. There's some planning lessons there. There's really some training and readiness lessons there too. The fact that you're moving a division's worth of folks quickly and being able to turn them, so rapidly and say, all right, we're not going to the south anymore. We're going straight, due east. And so there's a piece in there that can be taught about making sure that your folks, understand commander's intent. There's a piece in there that talks about mission command. There's a piece in there that talks about training and readiness, and being sure that all of your equipment is working. From the German side, there's some failures too, right? Like who went back and double checked to see that the detonators were in backwards? Who thought that the effect of having a handwritten note would cause a bridge to not be destroyed? So I mean, there are so many lessons to be learned that apply to us today. And lastly, I would say we are still partners with our NATO allies, right? And we still have to consider that there may be a time where we would have to conduct operations in Europe on the same terrain, full of rivers and canals and all kinds of other waterways and crossings that exist over in this very same terrain. And so I think that the lessons are just immeasurable in terms of the things that you could talk about for just Remagen and the build up to Remagen, and the battle there that got this big rock here next to us.
And all right, and so, sir, in previous conversations with you, I found out you actually have a personal connection, or a professional connection rather, to some of the units that were there.
I do. I commanded a battalion that in its history had fought at the Bulge and then moved into Remagen, and were one of the first units to move across the Ludendorff Bridge. And the company commander, he was thrust into command because his commander was killed in Bulge at Elsenborn Ridge, and then so now he's a company commander. And here's this guy who grew up on a dairy farm in Connecticut, and now he's looking, off to the east, straight down the Ludendorff Bridge, and was told, "I need you to get across." And it's pretty interesting when you talk to him. He said, they said run across the bridge, and so we did. And he said, "I've never run faster in my life, and I've never been more thankful to get to solid ground when they got onto the eastern shore there of the bridge." So it was a special moment to share with one of our World War II veterans who were losing at an amazing rate. And so, in terms of understanding our history and our legacy, I think we should, take the time to study this, to understand it, to get into the minds of and the experiences of what the folks that have gone before us have endured, and really just, it is a great tie to our legacy from our unit historian perspective, and where our units have come from, what they've gone through, and then hopefully we can build on that and go into the future.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, sir?
One interesting point: the major that was responsible for the bridge was actually court-martialed and executed for his failure. So note to self: when told to destroy a bridge, destroy a bridge.
Yeah, don't put the charges in backwards.
Don't
either.
put the charges in backwards, right? Do some inspections.
Well, sir, I want to thank you for sitting down to talk to me about one of the most pivotal battles in our history.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the offer.
Of course. And we'll take it back to the studio.
Hi, my name's Macy Duncan. I am a curator here at the National Mounted Warrior Museum. We had the opportunity to open our doors to the public in September of 2024. The National Mounted Warrior Museum offers educational opportunities, private tours with reservation, as well as over 4,000 square feet of exhibit space that covers 250 years of mounted warrior history. We cover the histories of units and soldiers who have served here on Fort Cavazos and continue to serve today. From the inception of the 3rd Cavalry Regiment and the 1st Cavalry Division, and their continued efforts in World War II, Vietnam, and the global war on terror, we also celebrate the community's role in the development of the post. We hope you come visit us Tuesday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We look forward to seeing you at the National Mounted Warrior Museum, where you too can live the legacy of the Mounted Warrior.
And welcome back to the studio, everybody. I want to say thank you first to the National Mounted Warrior Museum for letting us kind of crash the party a little bit and taking this show on the road. It was a lot of fun. So, and now I'm back in the studio with Janice.
Me?
Yeah.
That's right. Hey, folks. Oh my gosh, on location
Yeah.
at the museum. That must have been awesome.
It was a lot of fun. So I know before we started recording, you said that you'd been there before, correct?
I have.
Okay.
I have once before when it first opened, and my goodness, just all of the exhibits. The way it's even laid out, the openness of it, and then the grandeur of some of the exhibits, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so that was actually my first time going to the museum, because I know you were there for the opening.
I was.
I just wasn't, I think I was gone maybe, I can't remember, but for whatever reason I wasn't able to attend the opening, and so this was my first time. It was beautiful inside. I loved going through, getting to like our spot where we were recording, but I didn't have time to like go through any of the exhibits. But I'm very much so looking forward to it. I actually have a friend who's coming to visit in April, and so that was something we talked about. I'm going to take her to go see. So I'm excited for that. I think it'll be really fun.
Slow down and go through each of the exhibits.
Yeah.
It was like kind of like it was so many people there, and it was, everybody was looking at everything. So I probably didn't get to spend as much time as I would have liked. So I probably need to visit again, and maybe if somebody comes to visit me, hey, visitors, friends, come visit. I'll take you to the museum.
Yeah.
I
love that.
And I always love when we get to go on location. I just think it's, adds a little bit of dimension to what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree, especially so for this one. We're obviously, our viewers already know. For people who are not watching, you should be. You can watch on YouTube. But part of the backdrop for this podcast was, an actual piece of the bridge. We were there. I think it definitely adds something to what we're talking about when we're able to show what's going on. And plus, it's just fun getting out of the studio.
Absolutely. And I think that this podcast would definitely cater to, the history buffs.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree with that.
Yes. I know there are those, not me included, who out there who know everything there is to know about the history of the Army, the history of Fort Cavazos. I know there's some interesting details, and a lot of it can be uncovered in the museum as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love going in there. I was like walking back and forth to where we were recording. There's one of the Camp Hood signs in there, and I always love seeing that because in our office, as you walk down the hall, you get to see kind of the history of the Sentinel, the Installations newspaper, and how it changed. It was at one point the Hood Panther. And so, get to see all of that history. I think is so fun. I am not a history buff, but just getting to see it is always really, really exciting.
I love the evolution of it, like you said, and I am not a history buff either, but I do find it interesting. Yeah. It's just, I don't know, it's really hard to remember all those little details. Yes. But I guess if you're really into it and you're really passionate about it, it's almost like telling a story because you're that in tune with it and you really dig into it, and it just kind of, goes to memory. It doesn't for me. Speaking for others.
No, I think that's a great way to describe it, though. Yeah, telling a story. I love that.
Speaking of interesting things, what did you do over the weekend?
I wish I had a more interesting answer. I didn't do a thing. I just relaxed and enjoyed the weather. It was so beautiful out. I did nothing.
Well, sometimes those are my favorite type of weekends.
Yeah.
But this weekend I did something a little bit more interesting.
Okay. What did you do?
I went to the Austin Museum of Ice Cream. Yes. Now, before you get your hopes up, no, I didn't get to partake. Ice cream and I used to be better friends. However, we are estranged because of a little thing called lactose. So, but it was wonderful.
Good.
Wonderful. It was really fun. And I'm just never surprised about what people can do, to bring people in, interesting things like that. An ice cream museum. We have the National Warrior Mounted Museum. Austin has the ice cream museum.
Everybody's got something, Yes.
The tie-in is history.
Yeah.
So I learned a little bit about ice cream. A lot of it.
Yeah. I love that. So I personally haven't been there either, but Eric Franklin, one of our other co-hosts and teammates here, he's been before, and he said it was absolutely delicious. So
I love that description.
Yeah.
I love that. And you guys will find out more about it when I write about it in our Traveling Soldier column that we have in the Sentinel.
Yeah.
Now, as you know, Traveling Soldier lets people know about all the interesting and fun things to do in Central Texas. And instead of searching for it, we provide that for you every week.
Yeah, I love that. So personally, Traveling Soldier is one of my favorite sections in the paper. It's one of my favorite sections to write for, but it's also just one of my favorite sections to read because I am always learning stuff from you guys going to places. So I know that it's something I always push on people to read. And there's lots of ways that people can read it. If they are not subscribed, you can sign up. You can just go to our website, CavazosSentinel.com, and read previous Traveling Soldiers there. If you want to sign up for the email version of it, you can do that as well, which is my personal favorite way to read the paper. And then you can also just pick it up. There's, I want to say, more than 400 news racks across Central Texas.
Yeah.
You can pretty much find it anywhere.
You're going to be able to find it.
Yeah.
And personally, me, I have to read it online because I'm sorry, the print. My eyes just won't let me be great.
Fair.
And so,
That's fair.
I can actually blow it up as big as I need and read everything.
Yeah.
Yes,
No, I like reading the physical print. I was actually flipping through some of our old papers today for a work thing, and my fingers were starting to get the ink. And I just remember as a child, that was something I always loved when we'd get a fresh paper at the house. So it's something I still enjoy now, but I like getting the email version, which takes me to the online version, just because then I don't have to actually physically go out and get it. It's just in my email. Yeah. It's just so easy. One email sign up, and then that's that. You're good to go forever.
Now I do miss the smell of a book, the smell of the paper, the flipping of the pages.
Yeah,
but not that much.
Oh no.
Like I said, my eyes just won't let me be great nowadays.
Yeah,
it's okay though. I've got these.
That's right. And there's so many ways now for you to read our
Absolutely.
paper and just books in general and all of that. So.
And just so you guys know, pretty much anything we got you covered in the Sentinel. You like
True.
books? Got you covered.
Yep, I write a book column. every
Movies? Got you
Yep.
covered. Streaming series?
You got us covered.
You covered. And of course, traveling soldier. Anywhere you want to go, we've probably been there.
Probably.
And we can let you know all about it before you go.
Yeah. I love traveling soldier. I just love the paper in general. So,
Yes.
we're self-promoting, of course. But
Absolutely.
that's what we're here for.
Yeah. We couldn't go without doing that.
Quite literally, yeah.
So before we go, what is your word for this week?
My word for this week. I think I'm going to pick the word joy, because I have been trying to get into more personal hobbies. I've been taking up a lot of yoga recently. I started a puzzle over the weekend. So I guess I did something over the weekend. I started a puzzle. But yeah, I think leaning into the joy where I can find it is my word for the week.
I love that. So I think my word for this week is going to be perseverance.
Wasn't that your word last week?
No, it was resilience.
Oh, you're right. I'm so sorry. Very different.
There you go. But they have similar meanings.
Yes.
But this week I feel like I'm really pushing through things and really, really trying to see things through physical workouts, projects at work, trying to, get into my habits in the morning and, build a routine. So, yeah.
I think that's a good word. I love that.
Now I have to make sure I remember this one so you don't call me out next week. Didn't you pick that word next week? You know what? I might have. So, might have to
start
write it down.
like a little tally of what
I'll
our
have
words
to write
are.
it down.
I think that's a great idea.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think that's all we have for this week. So let's get right on into what we have planned for the actual week. Thank you to all of our listeners, and we will see you guys next week.
See you then.